Hello, my name is Jerrel Dulay from Sungrand. I'm the developer of the Silver Falls games. Today I wanted to answer a question, or actually sort of a couple different questions that I've received over the past month or so. People have been asking what my process is and what it takes to take a game that was designed for 2 screens and turn that into a single screen game. Also, how do I take a game that was designed with touchscreen controls in mind and turn that into a non-touchscreen control game. So, firstly, I'll be taking a look at Guardians and Metal Exterminators S, which will be launching January 11th on the Nintendo Switch. So, let's go ahead and just boot up the game here. Now, this game was originally launched on the Nintendo 3DS, so it was a little bit of a challenge because the top screen was supposed to be clear entirely. So, this game did not use touchscreen controls. I wanted to maintain a sense of the sort of 80s hardware controls, and they were all driven by buttons. There were no touchscreens in the 80s. And so to maintain that sense of the 80s, I wanted physical buttons only, no touchscreen controls. So you can see the cursor just moves around. So in this particular situation, it was not so difficult. What was difficult was rearranging all of the user face elements. So the user interface elements were designed for a 4:3 aspect ratio, and I've had to resize them to fit in a 16:9. And in general, in these kind of situations, what I do is I take the UI and I view it in halves, the left half and the right half. And in general, depending on what it is, of course, I will split them in half. So you'll see situations like this, where if you play the original on the 3DS, all of these UI elements were on the bottom screen. Nothing was on the top screen. And so you didn't need to have anything in the middle. So these two halves that you see on the screen were actually just pushed together and they'd be in the middle. But because we now have to fit everything on the one screen, and we still need visually things to make sense. If things were on top of the character, that really breaks up the vibe and the intention of these menus. These menus and these sort of little situations were meant to let you also have sort of a close look at your character, so that you can see them as you're switching in and out of the character that you're playing as. And so I needed to maintain, I needed a way to maintain that. So I split the UI in half, in left and right. Now, something that you also have to keep in mind is visibility and color scheme. So the original UI for this game, Guardians and Metal Exterminators on the 3DS, was black. There was a sort of a dull turquoise indigo background, and the text and all the icons were black, but you can see that I've changed them to that glow color. Now that's to evoke a sense of the 80s, as many of us may remember the watches from that era had a glow button, and if you push that, it would emit this soft glow that would let you see your watch in the dark. And so that is the color scheme that I've picked for this, is evoking that. Now I could not have black text anymore because the environments in this game are quite dark. So black text would have not been visible. And if I wanted to use the black text and the black icons from the original, that would mean I would have to have this bright indigo glow background behind each of the UI elements, and that would result in something that's visually quite harsh to look at and quite ugly. And it mean that it would block out the game. It would block out all the visual elements. You know, the bottom of the screen, you wouldn't be able to see what's back there. And it would make things feel cramped and cluttered. So it's quite important to consider all of these kinds of things. Every single thing, every small element does have an impact on all the elements around it. You know, these things are not all just disparate elements, you know. And so you can see that, again, this is another example of splitting that UI in half, of taking something that was just set in the middle and splitting it to the left and to the right. And you can see everything still works as normal. But it's great having this larger aspect ratio and a larger screen with a higher resolution. It means that I am able to fit more. For example, I can now fit the enemy level, which was not indicated in the original game. That's something that I was able to add. And also, when I start a mission, let's just have a look here. On the bottom of the screen, you can see I can now actually I can have that. I can say now playing what song it is, and some people are often asking me the names of the songs that are playing. So the name is in there, and the fictional author, the fictional musician, is now in there. You can see that the L and R buttons are rearranged in such a way to where I don't want to clutter up the UI. That's something that I pay an immense amount of attention to, and people have commented over the years is they really enjoy the games not having a cluttered UI. You can push the start button here and you can make the objectives go away if you get a sense of what the objectives are. Okay, then I already know what they are. I'll push start and make them go away. So, in general, I don't... This is my design philosophy. I don't really like having life bars. In modern design philosophies, in my modern design, in my games, I generally don't like having life bars. It is a nice, clear way to express that because we all understand what a life bar is, but they take away from the experience of the game. And a very great example of this are the original Resident Evils that use the EKG meter instead of a life bar. It really sets the tone of the game, and it makes it feel less like a video game, and it makes it just, it's a subtle design decision that makes things feel more tangible. But in this situation, I thought it would be best because I was sort of drawing on the 80s, and so I try to evoke the design philosophies of that particular era. I'll step out of the way a bit, and you can see the icons here. Is in the original you saw what every face button does, X, Y, A, B. I wanted to maintain that, but I shrunk it down. I made it significantly smaller so it doesn't take up too much space, but it's still very important. That's important information, so I need to make sure it's always very visible because players are always picking up new items, they're always carrying new items, so it was important to have that there. Also, having the buttons up top, even if people... this game is meant to be enjoyed casually. I don't expect people to memorize all of the controls and all the mechanics, and that's why those controls are always visible up there. So the counter for your shield, which has the number 4 to it, has the button ZL there, so you always know, even if you haven't played the game in like a month, 2 months, 3 months, you know that ZL does something. Push it. Oh, okay, that's what it does. Well, what does my ZR do? You push ZR, and the game shows you. Alright, okay, that's what that does that. So it's a game that it's designed to be enjoyed casually. It's not designed to demand your extended attention, you know, for you have to play this non-stop. It's designed for you to be able to enjoy it at your pace and however it works out in your schedule. So the UI even lends itself to that. That's why all of these things are so visible. All of the controls are so visible as well. So if you will just give me a moment here, I'll swap over to another game. Let's have a look at Ghoul Busters. So that's Guardians and Metal Exterminators, and that will be available January 11 is when that's launching. That will be in North America and Europe. So I'll boot up one game, and while that one's getting ready, let's get Ghoul Busters going here. Now, Ghoul Busters launched earlier this year on the Switch. This was one of the final games to launch on the 3DS as well. And due to significant demand, people asked me to bring this to the Nintendo Switch. Okay. So this is Silver Falls Ghoul Busters, which you can pick up from the Nintendo Switch eShop now. Originally, the title screen was entirely touchscreen controlled. So this is a situation where not only was I taking a game that was explicitly designed to use 2 screens, but also the bottom screen was heavily used as a touch interface. I didn't want cursors on this because it interferes with the flow of navigating through menus for Ghoul Busters. I wanted it to have a specific rhythm and flow to it, and so this is what I'm sticking with here. You can access the special effects, the code linker, with just a single button press. It gives it this sense of instantaneous action, you know, and that's something that I really wanted with Ghoul Busters. And the only other thing that I really needed to implement with cursors was the mission select, because there was no other way to implement this. So I'll go ahead. I don't want people to think that I'm just an Atticus only kind of guy, so I will pick Starland. So you can go from the beginning or continue. I'll continue here. And this is really the only sort of cursor selection here, as you can select a mission. So I'll just go ahead and start the first mission here. So with these design considerations, again, squishing it all into one screen meant that you have to incorporate the logic for that of hiding the previous menu, hiding the titles, when you could have the title constantly visible in the original. So let's go ahead and start up here. Now this was quite a difficult game to bring to a single screen, because players have to always be able to access their items and their virtual pet, and the virtual pet allows the player to deal with certain monsters. There's certain monsters that you can't kill, and you need that virtual pet to emit a sound. I'll do that now. And see, it made a sound. Originally, the virtual pet was supposed to be a virtual pet that you were supposed to be able to play and raise and feed it. And I'm hoping in an update I can address that and then make it so you can play with him more. But right now, you just press the L button, it makes a noise. So holding ZL or ZL makes your inventory show up. And this was the best solution through all of my testing, because it's so important being able to see everything that's going on. Ghoul Busters is, by design, it is a game where you absolutely need full awareness of your environment, and you need to respond to that environment. You need to plan ahead and you need to react to your environment. So you need all that visual information. If I cluttered up that space with all these elements, it would detract from the game. It would make it extremely difficult to visually parse what's going on, especially when you need to react to your environment very quickly. So holding ZL lets you bring up your items, and in general, a game like this, a lot of it does start coming down to muscle memory. Okay, so there's some input lag on my capture card there, so I normally wouldn't have whiffed that. Okay, so we'll go ahead and use some items. So I'll get out of the screen here. So when you hold ZL, again, on the original version, these would always be visible on the bottom screen. It was a lot easier using touch controls. But here, again, we have to take into account, how am I supposed to implement 8 usable items without a touch screen? And you can see here, I've implemented using the right analog stick. In the game, shows you controls here is the right analog stick, the letter R. You can see it pointing up, down, left, and right. And you also have your A, B, X, Y. So if I press that right analog stick to the left, you can see that it activates my balloon, and I can now, the input lag on my capture card, you can see that helps, but that's got limited. I'll get my umbrella here. Oh, I've fallen. I've fallen. Okay. So if I press B, I'll get my umbrella here. There we go. And they're mapped to buttons that, in general, they shouldn't interfere with your general actions. You can see that B is your jump button, so in general... Okay, so it's very difficult to get the timing with this capture card. The umbrella is tied to your jumping, so you can see in general having it mapped to the B button. Your A button isn't really used in the game, so that's why I've mapped the health, so you don't accidentally waste your health. In general, you only use your B and Y, so you can't accidentally waste your ninja stars, and you can't waste your health items. And the umbrella is mapped to B because generally you're going to be jumping anyway, and the umbrella is mapped to that. And there's another item that isn't in my inventory at the moment. I think that would be the, let's see, you also have your other items. You have your fireworks and your helicopter. Now something that's missing from this that the 3DS has is the 3DS shows the character that you did not select. That character will be on the bottom screen, and they are in a treehouse, and it shows that that character is actually throwing the items out to you. So it's implying that you're never really playing as just the one character. Your other character is actually the one that's throwing you all of these assist items. So that is the thought process of taking a touchscreen game with a second screen and turning that into a single screen game. Those are the concessions, the sort of thought process and decisions that go into that process. So let me go ahead and bring up Ruby River now. So, Gaiden, Deathly Delusion Destroyers, and Ruby River is a game. It was the very final game that launched on the Nintendo 3DS. It was only able to launch in North America. So we're going ahead and put this into chill mode here. I'll have to use the touchscreen as I haven't finished programming the physical controls here. So I'll be working on that today. We'll go ahead and start. So I've had to program some new mechanics into my universal control system for my game. So you can see, let's see here, my camera controls are inverted at the moment, which is it's a little confusing to me. So the buttons that you see behind me are from the original 3DS game, but they'll be removed once I finish the programming on that. But in general, these two buttons here were for optimization. On the 3DS, I added those buttons so you could close these menus, and that allowed the game to have a better frame rate, higher frame rate. So because we don't have access to those buttons, you now hold the Y button, and if you hold that for about a second, that disappears. If you hold the X button for about a second, that menu will disappear. I'll have to get used to the inverted controls here. You can see a neat little forest down there as well, so we can go for a walk and have a look at what's going on here. These trees, they look great during the day, but for some reason during the night they're absorbing too much light, so I will have to make adjustments there. So I'm going to hold the X button again, and by pressing the X button you can toggle through the different categories of your inventory, but you are not able to access. So anything that's inventory related was always relegated to the right menu, and anything that was building or crafting related was relegated to the left menu, which I will open now. We've got my build structures there as well. So this game is going to be an immense challenge. Can I build that? I may actually be able to build that. So if I press down on the D-pad, I've got a nice bench now. Great. Okay, if I press Y, that'll toggle through. I don't have enough to build. It would have been nice if I could build a campfire and we could just sit here and talk by the campfire for a little bit. So I think if I press L, that'll toggle through my pages. No? Okay, I think that's for building only. So there's quite some graphics that are still in the process of being remastered. So the bed, for example, is still the 3DS graphics. Those are not the remastered. So what was so difficult about redesigning the UI for Ruby River is that I'd never intended Ruby River to ever be ported or remastered to another console. And so I really leaned into the touchscreen. So I really had to. Luckily, I'd already designed it so it was split down the middle, left and right, in terms of inventory on that side, crafting and building on the other side. Now, unfortunately, that's where the easy part stops, because you have no way to access your actual items. Like, all of those things are context sensitive and clickable, which means I will have to program a cursor. All of those stats up there, you touch those stats to level up. So I'll now have to program a cursor to move between those buttons so that you can access those functions, those buttons there. You'll need that in order to change your weapons. And to move that cursor around, you'll use the D-pad. But the D-pad is already used for the building menu. So that's where I've got a little bit of a challenge here, is now I'll have to program it to where when the build menu is open, then I'll have that cursor disappear. The cursor won't appear. And that's probably going to be a little bit confusing for people if the cursor is not visible. And so I'm going to have to put in some considerations on how I'm going to implement that to where it won't be confusing to the players here. So let's go ahead and just run down into this valley here. So the UI is still a little bit chunky because the buttons had to be big so that they could be pressed by the player without risk of missing the button during a moment that is important during gameplay. So I'm just going to have to streamline the interface there so you can see the health bar up in the corner is very visible, but I'm going to put in some testing to see how much I can reduce the size of that, because I don't want it taking too much space. You want your UI basically to be as unobstructive as possible. The bigger your UI is, the more of an obstruction it is, and it makes it harder to focus on the environment of the game and parse the visual information. On that note, though, you need your UI to be, as I said, easy to parse the information. You need to be able to just glance at your UI and understand what information is there, especially when it comes to your health. So I'm just going to try to reduce the size on that. Maybe I'll make it slightly transparent because I would like it to blend a little more. Right now, it visibly stands out a fair bit. Now, when the game was split across two screens, it didn't really matter because those UI elements were separated from the game world. But because the UI is now sharing space with the game world, you have to put in design considerations so that all of the visual elements are cohesive. This wind is also the 3DS version, so it looks quite basic and dull, so that's something I'll have to address as well. And so those are the design considerations that I've had to put in for Ruby River is, if it's possible, split the elements between left and right. Because if it's coming from a dual screen game, you can't just have that content in the middle of your screen. This is content that was designed to be visible simultaneously with your game world. And you can no longer have them visible simultaneously with your game world without obstructing the view of that game world. So that means shrinking the elements down, breaking them apart and splitting them up in a way that's logical and makes sense, but also easy to access. So you hold down the button, and that opens up there. So, all right. Well, I hope that was interesting, and I hope I've answered your questions all about that. And just before I wrap up, let me do my my parkour here. So the game was never designed to be about traversal. For example, games like Just Cause and The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, those games are about traversal, very exciting traversal. Ruby River's not about traversal, so I didn't have I didn't have a complex climbing system and vehicles and you can put on a glider. This game was more about building, crafting, and survival, and not about traversal. So if you use the jump, you really have infinite stamina and you can climb up basically wherever you want. So I just climbed up that hill there, and let's see what this section of the forest is like. There we go, that's pretty exciting. So you can basically traverse and I apologize for the jittery camera controls here. I have inverted camera turned off, and I don't play with inverted, so it's confusing me. It's confusing me a little bit. So, all right. I hope that was interesting to you. Thanks very much for watching, for supporting my games. If you have any other questions, please feel free to ask. And yeah, please look forward to January 11th when Guardians and Metal Exterminators S will be launching on the Nintendo Switch. Okay, take care of yourselves, everyone, and we'll see you in Silver Falls.